The following program contains shocking amounts of primary sources. If you suffer from addiction to rumors, this show might not be right for you. Check with your cheerleading captain.
Standing for truth in the four corners of America. Fighting for justice on the frontiers of the culture wars. And turning resistance into an art form. The host who has no equal. He uses sweet and low. Randall Terry.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Just got back from a vacation in cyberspace. You know, when reality gets to be a little too much to bear, there's nothing like going into the world of the internet, where you can hide. You can take on an alternate name. You can live in an alternate reality. Never mind the damage, harm that it might do to you, your family, your spouse, your children, your very soul. It just feels good. Let's all go and hang out in a cyber ghetto together, using fake names, of course. We'll talk more about this when I come back, but first, a word of wisdom from the dude with one functioning lip, Rusty Calpo.
These leaders of them 501c3 groups, heck, they're strutting around like they've been riding some Bremerville for 8 seconds. Whoa. Heck, they ain't even mutton busting. You can Google that too. Mutton busting.
Welcome to the show, friend. I'm going to talk to you for a minute about something that we intend to cover more in depth in the future, but I felt like I wanted to at least put the seeds of thought in your mind, give you something to ponder. We have literally hundreds of thousands of people who have watched this television show online. In addition to being carried in 45 cities and the program airing twice a day on those TV stations, we have a fairly large number of people who watch us on a computer. I have a bachelor's degree from the State University of New York that I got online in communications. I have a master's degree from a military school, Norwich University, in diplomacy and international terrorism. I also got that degree online. The computer and the internet have provided unprecedented, never paralleled in human history, access to information. And I have taken advantage of that information. And I encourage my friends to do the same thing. You need a degree? Why waste a lot of time sitting in a classroom with a bunch of young people, half of whom are half asleep? 20% of them are still stoned from last night's encounter with drugs or alcohol, and they're either giving you things you don't want or offering you things you don't need, etc. Having said that, I want to issue a very, very strong challenge and warning to parents and to grandparents. I don't think that, let me say it in the positive, it will take at least a generation, maybe two, for psychologists, psychoanalysts, people that study society. It will take that long for professionals who do truly unbiased work to determine the negative impact that the internet and cyberspace and video games have played on the human mind, on the interior of individuals, on marriages, on families, on the ability of people to explore in the real world, to become proficient at something. I started down this path of thinking the other day when somebody sent out an email that said, look what happens to your children when they don't play video games. That's a great teaser. And it brought up these three boys who, one played a banjo, one played the fiddle, and one played the guitar. They were all in a family, and they were phenomenal. They were unbelievable. They've actually played at Carnegie Hall. That's what happens when you're not playing a video game. You become proficient. So let me say this in the kindest way that I can. My wife and I have 4 small sons. It's always an effort, or almost always an effort, unless they're asleep, to corral them, to keep them moving forward in the tasks that we've given them. If you have children, you know the strain and the stress of getting them to practice an instrument, if you've got them in a lesson, of doing their homework, of finishing a chore or a task. And frankly, it's just a path of less resistance. It's a little bit easier to just plop them in front of a television, in front of a video game, in front of the computer, and say, just go, get out of my hair. But it's slowly destroying the child, or at least greatly harming them, handicapping them. The advent of all of these drugs and narcotics used to control children's behavior in public schools and government schools is closely tied to attention deficit disorder, all right? Well, have you ever put a 6 or a 7 or an 8-year-old in front of a video game or a really intense action movie? What do you see? You see the child sitting motionless. Perfect attention. Motionless. Then take that child, put them in a classroom setting, and they fidget, and they can't stay focused. Again, the research is still coming in. I was talking the other day with an acquaintance of mine who's a child counselor. And he said that when they first started creating these games and certain television shows, they knew how many bits of information were coming at a child per second, right? Stimuli. And it was in the millions. And then as the lines on TVs got more dense and more data was able to come, and computer screens and video games were able to have more information in them, it went into the billions. And now they literally, according to my friend who is a child counselor, he said they cannot measure the amount of data, all right? The human mind was not created and designed by God, especially small children, to have that amount of data hurled at it incessantly. It's actually doing something physiologically, neurologically in their brains, so that then they can't keep their attention on a simple task that doesn't have all of that stimuli bombarding them simultaneously. I've got to take a break. I'm way over on my time. I'll pick up with this thought when I come back. But listen, if you are going to make a move that curtails the amount of time that your children spend doing certain things or in front of certain images, you're going to get pushback. You're going to get resistance. You're going to hear whining and complaining. And you're the grown-up. And it's your duty to do what's right for your child and not let the lunatics run the asylum. I'll be right back.
Randall and I had just returned from the Northwest Territory and went straight to the capital. We managed to convince Secretary Seward that Alaska was a ripe plum, and he agreed to finance it. Seward's folly and Randall's folly have a lot in common. They both turned to gold.
Friend, you need to get this book, We Won't Get Fooled Again. Listen to this. I came to the conclusion that most folks were left over from the Reagan era who were no longer warriors, but are now either too old or unhealthy and had compromised and become comfortable with the Republican establishment. They turned these organizations pretty much into direct mail fundraising fronts and were making tons of money and living the good life in beautiful mansions. The conservative movement had transformed itself from a very dynamic, principled organization in the Reagan years to a bunch of compromising, useless, and ineffective money-making machines. I'm reading to you from the new blockbuster book, We Won't Get Fooled Again, that names names, shows organizations, shows how they say that they're Christian, but they betray Christ, they betray biblical principles in the public square, and we are funding them. Go to the website, call us on the phone, and order it today. I'll send it to you for free if you want. God bless you.
Hello, Cleveland! Yeah! What? You can't turn the channel. You need to watch more Randall Terry. Yeah!
Welcome back, friend. This week, a very long, multi-decade study from New Zealand that was released at the University of Otago, I think I'm pronouncing that right, showed some very startling results and findings. They began following a bunch of kids who were born in the 1970s, about 1,000 young people. And they studied them from the age of 5 to 15, and then left them alone, and then resumed the study of them when they were 26 years old and older. And this study focused on the correlation between amount of time watching television and then antisocial or criminal behavior as adults. What they found was that when a child's average television watching went up 1 hour per night, with every hour average per night that a child watched television, they had a 30% increase in criminal behavior. Let the weight of that sink in. So, you watch another hour, another hour every night, 30% increase. Add an hour on top of that, another 30% increase. The doctors who did this multi-decade study said that they do not have any hard data in front of them concerning video games now, these games that have unthinkable violence going on inside of them. But, you know, they're smart enough and anecdotal enough to say that they think that it's going to become much worse because now you have stimulus coming to the child's brain that is not only antisocial, but they're participating in the cyber killing, all right, the imagined killing of other human beings in these games. Let's bring this all the way back around to you and your grandchildren or your children or nieces and nephews. If you are going to cut back or eliminate video games or extensive movie and TV watching or time in front of the computer, depending on your children's ages and the obedience level that the children in your charge or that are near you exhibit, you're going to get some disappointment. You might have tantrums. Heck, you might have tantrums, things that they do and act out that are the direct reflection of things that they've seen on television or in video games. But God has given parents the charge over their children. Please, I have to deliver to you a burden that is rightfully yours. The only eternal thing that God gives us in this life, besides our own eternal immortal soul, our own immortal soul, the only immortal thing that God puts in our care are our children. That's it. Your car's going to rust. Your clothes are going to get moth-eaten. Okay? Gold and silver can't be taken with you into the next life. All of it stays here. And much of it corrupts and just decays with time. Your children are immortal souls that God has put in your charge. And God has commanded us as parents to train up children in the way that they should go. If we're putting our children in front of the television or in front of the computer or allowing them to play these horrific, godless video games, we are putting them on a path that is going to have horrible consequences for them. And someday, God help us, we will give some type of account to our Maker for what we have done and for what we have failed to do. I'm going to take a break. When we come back, some thoughts, words of exhortation, words of encouragement, things that you can do. And I'm going to tell you about one of the things that people regret, all right? And one of the things that makes them really, really happy. Don't go.
Moments with Moses. They will stumble over one another as if to escape a sword. though none pursues, and you shall have no power to stand before your enemies.
Friend, you need to get this book. We Won't Get Fooled Again. Listen to this. I came to the conclusion that most folks were left over from the Reagan era who were no longer warriors, but are now either too old or unhealthy and had compromised and become comfortable with the Republican establishment. They turned these organizations pretty much into direct mail fundraising fronts and were making tons of money and living the good life in beautiful mansions. The conservative movement had transformed itself from a very dynamic, principled organization in the Reagan years to a bunch of compromising, useless, and ineffective money-making machines. I'm reading to you from the new blockbuster book, We Won't Get Fooled Again, that names names, shows organizations, shows how they say that they're Christian, but they betray Christ, they betray biblical principles in the public square, and we are funding them. Go to the website, call us on the phone, and order it today. I'll send it to you for free if you want. God bless you. Man is called a reactionary if he objects to having his property stolen and his wife and children murdered. Sir Winston Churchill. Welcome back to the program. I was speaking with a man the other day who said to me, I am so thankful for the thousands of hours that I invested in playing video games as a child, because now they have perfectly equipped me to become a door greeter at Walmart. I was talking to another man who said how much he regretted having spent hours learning to become a pianist and a jazz saxophone player, because now he is able to charge like $100, $120 an hour for studio performances where he plays on various albums and stuff. And he was just railing on his mother and his father for buying him these expensive instruments, paying for his music lessons, and making him practice. He said, all my friends were playing video games, and I was denied that. And I could be working at Walmart with them. Wasn't that sick? That was dark. I did that on purpose because, think about it. In childhood, there is a finite amount of time that must be redeemed. David, King David in the scriptures, he is outside of Jesus himself, he is the central figure in the scriptures. There are more references to David than any other person in the Bible. What do we know about David's childhood? Well, we know that he was a keeper of the sheep, okay? We know that he was the youngest, and we know that he had the nasty, yucky job of shivering in the cold with the sheep, of being hot in the sun with the sheep. But we also know, by inference, that his mom and his dad required of him that he use that time wisely. We know that David could read and write. We know that David was an incredible athlete, because when it was time as a teenage boy to face Goliath, he hit Goliath in the forehead with his first shot with a stone while he was at a dead run. Do you know how many hours of practice it takes? Just picture David as a young boy with the sheep in the field, and he's got a tree. And his dad said, I want you to throw that stone 500 times today. 500 times. Dad, my arm hurts. I don't care. 500 times, and I'm going to monitor how you progress in this. So his first attempts at throwing the stone, he missed the tree completely. Just completely missed the tree. But after a while, he could hit the tree. Started to feel good about himself. And then after a while, he could say, well, I'm going to hit that one spot. And he could hit a spot that big, here, there, all right? And then he said, I'm going to aim for just that knot. And he began to be able to hit the knot of the tree consistently. And then he thought, well, let's make this a real challenge. Let's do it on the run. He was redeeming his time. He was practicing. He told Saul, I fought a lion and I fought a bear with my bare hands to capture them, or rather to retrieve from them the sheep that were in danger. What else do we know? I love this. We know he was a phenomenal musician and a singer. His first entrance into the court of King Saul was not because he had slain Goliath. prior to that, Saul was tormented by demons. And one of Saul's court said, let us search for a man who is a skillful player and see if the music soothes you and drives the evil spirit away. And then they talked. They said, I've heard of a young man in Bethlehem. King David came and played and sang and had a beautiful voice and wrote all of that beautiful music, so much of that has been used by the church for 2,000 years now and was used in the Jewish community for 1,000 years. David became who he was as a man because he had been equipped to become that as a boy. If you've got children, invest in musical instruments, not video games. Invest in music lessons, not the latest fad in clothing. If we took the money that we spent on designer clothing and designer sneakers, and instead, or at least for clothing, went to the secondhand store. It's hard to find good footwear used, but you can go to the secondhand store and get some great clothing items, and then take that money, instead of buying those high-end, high-dollar clothing items and video games, buy a musical instrument or two and invest in lessons. And then require them to practice. Yes, at first it's hard, but it pays off in the end. Your child will be a better man or a better woman for it, and you will be a prouder parent. And if we're not sticking them in front of a television, we have a lot less chance that they're going to grow up and descend into criminal behavior. I'll be right back. Save me, O God, by thy name, and judge me in thy strength. For strangers have risen up against me, and the mighty have sought after my soul, and they have not set God before their eyes. Friend, you need to get this book. We Won't Get Fooled Again. Listen to this. I came to the conclusion that most folks were left over from the Reagan era who were no longer warriors, but are now either too old or unhealthy and had compromised and become comfortable with the Republican establishment. They turned these organizations pretty much into direct mail fundraising fronts and were making tons of money and living the good life in beautiful mansions. The conservative movement had transformed itself from a very dynamic, principled organization in the Reagan years to a bunch of compromising, useless, and ineffective money-making machines. I'm reading to you from the new blockbuster book, We Won't Get Fooled Again, that names names, shows organizations, shows how they say that they're Christian, but they betray Christ, they betray biblical principles in the public square, and we are funding them. Go to the website, call us on the phone, and order it today. I'll send it to you for free if you want. God bless you. Well, the pursuit of bread and circuses, with its long and illustrious history, has led many of us down paths that in retrospect, we wish we hadn't gone on. So this isn't just about how we raise our children, it's about us. The cyber ghetto, cyberspace, has done an awful lot to hurt families, create alternate realities, allow people to create fictitious persons, and for many of us to live in a fantasy world. Whether it's that the real world takes too much work or it's too painful, whatever the issues are, I want to encourage you, and really as gently as I can, but spend as little time in front of your computer as you can. As little time in front of your television as you can. Get rid of the video games. Read the Chronicles of Narnia. Don't just rent the movies. read the books. The books are better than the movies. Read Lord of the Rings. Read G.K. Chesterton. Read books that will strengthen your soul, give breadth and depth and wonder and beauty to life, and help you and your children become better people as we strive to serve God in this life and be with Him for eternity.